everyone, good evening. I'm Shreya Dhondia. It's not over till it's over. Fits perfectly well with coronavirus, which after a lull is back to pushing the world into an era of restrictions. So international travel that was to open up in India on 15th of December has been postponed till further notice. Mandatory quarantine and RT-PCR tests are dominating headlines, and it's time to be cautious once again. That's not a bad thing. Today, as new travel rules kicked in, there was chaos and confusion at airports. Chaos at international airports where people had to take RT-PCR tests and then wait in crowded areas. Confusion because states like Maharashtra have issued their own rules that mandate a 7-day institutional quarantine for all people arriving from risk countries, along with 3 RT-PCR tests. In fact, Maharashtra wants RT-PCR test reports even for domestic travelers. For example, if I'm traveling from Delhi to Mumbai, I will need to have an RT-PCR report. The centre and the state are on collision course once again. Here's the thing, doomsday is not upon us. So far, Omicron has not shown any severe symptoms in South Africa, where it was first detected. In fact, virologists are saying that Indians are better placed to deal with the Omicron variant because a large number of us, 67% of us, already have antibodies. Kiran Shaw is joining me on the show to talk about vaccine efficacy against Omicron and if panic should be a default button every time a new variant arrives. Let's start though with what was a day of chaos at airports across India as new travel rules with layers of tests and restrictions kicked in today.
Long queues, irate passengers, and ironically COVID norms gone for a toss amid big crowds. This was day one of the newest normal in airports across the country as the anti-Omicron protocol finally kicked in. At Delhi's IGI airport this morning, passengers had to wait for up to 6 hours for clearance. They faced a Sophie's choice: opt for an antigen test which takes about 2.5 to 3 hours, costing 3,900 rupees, or go in for the cheaper RT-PCR test at rupees 500, which takes up to 6 hours.
इसका आइडिया नहीं था कि आज से शुरू हो गया है, तो बहुत दिक्कत हुई. अभी हमने वो महंगे वाला RT-PCR करके 4,000 रुपए में तो 1 घंटे का टाइम दिया था, पर 2 घंटे लग गए हैं.
It was very clearly explained that we needed to do a PCR test at the airport, and we had 2 options: a regular one which takes 5 hours, and a rapid one which takes 1 hour.
बहुत लोग एक तरह रो रहे थे कि भाई हमारी कनेक्टिंग फ्लाइट का कोई गाइड करने वाला नहीं था.
If Delhi was bad, Mumbai was a nightmare, even beyond the exit gates. The state government has refused to keep faith in the gold standard of RT-PCR tests conducted on arrival, citing false negatives. And so, passengers from at-risk nations must take 3 tests on the 2nd, 4th and 7th days after arrival during quarantine. Till then, everyone has to stay in institutional quarantine.
I had taken a RT-PCR test from London, which costed me around 15,000 rupees for 2 of them. Right. And again over here, coming at the airport, they made us to go through this pain actually. So why was that? Why did they made it necessary to file up that Air Suvidha form and PCR test?
Similar horror stories from Bengaluru as well. Passengers from at-risk nations couldn't get out of the arrival lounge until their results came negative. Chennai too has its arrival hall at bursting point, with passengers having to choose between cheaper but time-taking tests or faster and pricier ones. But lest you feel that it's just the consumers who have borne the brunt of the Omicron threat, spare a thought for the industry itself. The panic in the skies has grounded all commercial flights once again, which is supposed to resume on the 15th of this month. The aviation industry once again finds its wings clipped. Ritangshu Bhattacharya for CNN News 18.
The list of countries deemed at risk for now includes the United Kingdom, all 44 countries in Europe, South Africa of course, Brazil, Bangladesh, Botswana, China, Mauritius, New Zealand, Zimbabwe, Singapore, Hong Kong and Israel. Now, So far, no cases of Omicron have been reported in India, but it is just a matter of time. Genome sequencing results are awaited for at least 12 cases that come from high-risk countries and have tested positive upon arrival in India. Have they carried the new variant with them? We should know in the next 48 hours. What we will not know for sure in the next 48 hours is whether vaccines are effective against the new variant that has 50 mutations. All vaccine makers have gone into war mode, testing their vaccines against Omicron. Some say there is a good chance that new vaccines may be needed.
Major variants of concern like Alpha, Beta, Gamma and Delta had 11 to 13 mutations across their spike protein. But the new variant on the block, Omicron, has around 32 mutations. So the question on everyone's mind is, can vaccines neutralize this new strain? In 1 week, Omicron has spread to nearly 20 countries, but it's early days yet. One of the world's top vaccine makers, Pfizer, has already started working on a version that's specifically targeting the Omicron variant, in case its current vaccine is not effective against the new strain.
There are a few things that we don't know about the vaccine, but there are a few things that we know for certain. We don't know if it's going to be more virulent. We don't know if it's going to transmit faster or have higher disease. We don't know if it will escape the protection of our vaccines, but we know the sequence of the virus. We have it. And this is how everything starts. We started at risk producing a vaccine.
Moderna, on the other hand, has warned that the world may need new vaccines to fight Omicron. Stephanie Bancel, the head of Moderna, said, and I quote, "All the scientists I've talked to are like, this is not going to be good," unquote. AstraZeneca, whose Covishield is the most widely used vaccine in India, is studying data on Omicron and has started testing the efficacy of its vaccine. Scientists are still studying the new variant, and it may take at least 2 weeks to know about its transmissibility and how it behaves against vaccines. But some of the world's leading vaccinologists are hopeful that vaccines will work against Omicron.
We'll know about how effective vaccines are because we can do a test. What you can do is measure antibody responses to the vaccines, either in laboratory animals or from patients who have been, or volunteers who have been immunized against the vaccines, and see if those antibodies will cross-neutralize the Omicron variant. And we'll know that probably by next week at this time or within the next 2 weeks.
Despite limited information about Omicron, scientists say booster shots are the best weapon against it.
Full vaccination doses, as well as the booster doses, is going to be very important. And even if that turns out to be less effective against the Omicron, it will still provide us with some form of protection, particularly, hopefully, against severe disease.
While the world is still coming to terms with the Omicron variant, the bottom line is this.
We've said it over and over again, and it deserves repeating. If you're not vaccinated, get vaccinated. Get boosted if you are vaccinated.
With NC Satpathy, Anisya Kumar for CNN News 18.
Booster doses, that's a conversation just about beginning in India. Is it now time to boost up immunity for our healthcare workers and the vulnerable population, given that they were given the doses, the vaccine doses, much before anyone else? Or should we wait for everyone in India to be vaccinated with 2 doses before giving out boosters? That's a decision that, of course, the government of India will need to take sooner rather than later. But for the moment, the focus on Omicron and if vaccines and current treatment protocols work against this new variant. Kiran Shaw, chairperson of Biocon Limited, is joining me this evening on Debrief, taking some questions from me. Ma'am, thank you very much for your time here on Debrief. You tweeted earlier today of positive news in the fight against Omicron. Could you elaborate how this boosts chances of an effective antibody treatment?
I just want to basically mention that, we had announced our partnership with Adagio Therapeutics, who are actually developing a broad spectrum antibody a drug to treat and use prophylactically for COVID-19. And I think what is interesting is that Adagio have just announced that their antibody actually neutralizes all the variants that have been discovered so far, including Omicron. And this is not the case with other, antibody prep, which I think is very good news for Adagio and for us, of course, because we are actually going to be making this antibody for India and many, many emerging markets.
And ma'am, by when will it be available?
Well, the trial is still ongoing. It will be available as soon as it's approved. But suffice to say that, we will be in a position to provide this antibody, hopefully if it gets approved, anytime early to mid next year, we are ready with the antibody.
Do you believe that our current vaccine and antibody cocktail treatment is Omicron of future variant proof?
So I just think that, every variant actually causes this kind of panic and hysteria. And I do believe that, we need to look at these new variants very differently in different parts of the world based on the level of vaccination. Because we clearly know that vaccination is muting variants. So whilst the reinfection rates might, certainly happen, we need to really focus on data concerning severity of the disease and mortality. And from all the kind of reports that we hear thus far, it appears that even in South Africa, they're reporting mild cases of COVID-19. And you must remember that South Africa is very under-vaccinated. And also, I think we must remember that even many parts of Europe that are reporting, this particular Omicron virus, the variant, are also areas where there has been a huge anti-vax backlash. Netherlands, even in Germany, etc., etc. So I think we need to basically corroborate data of vaccination and the variant and the severity of the disease before we start all these very drastic measures that every country is taking. And I, for one, believe that actually just imposing lockdowns is not going to prevent the variant from spreading. It's vaccination that will help us to deal with these new variants. And this is not the last variant. We are going to have many more mutants and many more variants. So I just think we need to deal with this disease in a much more pragmatic way. And I really think that it needs to be led by science.
Which brings me to the pictures that have come to us from across airports in India today and the chaos and the confusion there. Are you buying into this mass hysteria that's currently gripping the world over the Omicron variant?
Well, the present vaccines will protect you to a certain extent, but, in terms of severity of the disease, but they may not protect you from getting infected. We have seen that many of these vaccines have not protected people against reinfection. You've seen that in Israel. You've seen that in many parts of the world. And Omicron is no different. So I just believe that I'm not even, trying to say that we don't have data about transmission. I think it is very transmissible. I think they're already saying that it may be more transmissible than Delta variant. But the fact is, let me ask you one question. The Delta variant was largely present in India and other parts of the, this part of the world, right? But very soon, Delta found its way around the world. And today, Delta is the dominant variant around the world. So and you can see that even though it's reached the US, I think Delta has not really had that kind of a devastating impact that it had in unvaccinated people.
Ma'am, there are many virologists saying that India is better placed to deal with Omicron than others, given that most of India has antibodies already.
Well, I certainly agree with the virologists. I really believe that the higher the level of vaccination in any country, the lower will be the kind of severity of disease. And I think that's the data we should be actually sharing. We should be actually talking about the impact of Omicron on people, whether they are vaccinated, not vaccinated, whether it's a severe symptoms, whether it's moderate symptoms, mild symptoms. I don't think any of this data is really known in a very comprehensive way at the moment. So, okay, whilst it's better to be safe than sorry, I really, look at some of the protocols that the government is hurriedly coming up with, and I don't blame them because that's what's happening around the world. But is it really going to prevent Omicron from entering our shores is the question, Even if you basically test everyone at the airport, I mean, this is, I think, harassment because, most of these passengers have taken long journeys, sometimes 20-hour journeys. They're arriving in the country and they have to spend another 5 to 6 hours getting their test reports. And I worry that if you do these mass kind of, testing at airports in an enclosed space, even if you have a distancing between the chairs, I mean, aren't you putting even uninfected people at grave risk? So I just feel that testing is very important. But I think it's about really tracking the people who have been tested, and those who are positive definitely need to be controlled. But those who are negative, I think you can allow them to, have an easier life.
And therefore, do you feel 2 years after the pandemic, our default reaction to the pandemic is still panic?
This is a question we need to ask the whole world. I don't think it's just about India. I think the whole world is still in a state of panic. We don't seem to have learned enough about this virus or disease management or preparedness or how to deal with any variant. I mean, I'm really surprised that we are reacting in this way because I don't think we should be, reacting with paranoia and panic. I really think we need to actually respond in a much more pragmatic way with a better sense of preparedness. Otherwise, all the things we've talked about over the last several months about vaccination, about testing, about antibody treatments, about other kinds of treatments is then not making any sense.
Kiran Majumdar-Shaw, thank you very much for joining us here on Debrief. It was good to have you. On that note, we are taking a quick break. Up next, why most virologists and doctors are saying that India's immunity will save it from Omicron. We are hearing from Dr. Devi Shetty and Dr. Gagandeep Kang. Do stay with us. Are Indians better placed to deal with Omicron than the rest of the world? Yes, say some of the world's top virologists, given that 60% of India already has antibodies, according to the latest Sero survey. There is another silver lining. Take a look.
The worry over Omicron is strong enough to make markets tremble around the world. But is India's immunity enough against the Omicron variant? Say yes, most experts citing the National Sero Survey. India's second wave, driven by the Delta variant, was devastating and ended up infecting many people. The fourth Sero Survey found that 67% Indians have antibodies, most by the way of infections. Delhi showed 97% antibodies, Mumbai had 85 to 90%. That means most Indians will be protected against severe disease caused by Omicron or any other variants.
If anybody in the world is going to be well protected against new variants, it's going to be that population in India that has both been infected and vaccinated.
Though not a single case of the Omicron variant has been reported so far in India, but it's just a matter of time. Will vaccines be effective against Omicron?
too early to say. It may dip a few notches, but will not become useless. So masks and vaccines will still remain the first line of defense, says Dr. Devi Shetty.
So most of the patients who are in the ICU are unvaccinated Americans and Europeans. Vaccinated, that's the reason why I'm not sure whether you read this statement by the health minister of Germany that everyone in Germany will be vaccinated or recovered from virus or dead. This is what the health minister of Germany made a statement. And this vaccination, no doubt, is definitely going to help, irrespective of what mutation the COVID virus is going to have.
South Africa, where Omicron was first detected, has vaccinated only 25% of its population. But it's better than most African countries, where the vaccination cover is only 7%. India's overall vaccination is 60%, and the aim is to cover every adult citizen in the next 1 month. As that happens, some doctors are seeing a silver lining.
Omicron is replacing the deadly Delta variant, then the COVID wave which is ravaging Europe at this present moment will be replaced by Omicron, which produces mild variety.
While experts believe a big number of Indians are likely to remain protected from Omicron or any other variant for that matter, it's important we continue to follow all COVID-appropriate behavior and get vaccinated. In New Delhi, I'm Runjhun Sharma.
In times like these, going back to the basics is the best way forward. Masks and vaccines still continue to be our best bet, say doctors. Omicron is a story. Continue to track here on Debrief through the week. For the moment, thanks for watching and good night.